Hi everyone! What's the first word you learned in English? Probably hello, right? Hello is the most basic way to greet someone in English. There are many different ways to greet people and introduce yourself in English. In different situations, you'll need to use different words and phrases to greet people and make introductions. In this lesson, we can learn about greetings and introductions in English and see which language you should use in different situations. First, let's discuss formal greetings and introductions in English. Imagine that you are on a business trip or on a meeting with some important clients for the first time. Or maybe you work in service, for example in a hotel, and you need to talk to guests and customers. In these situations, you'll want to use more formal language. Good morning, you must be Yoda. Yes, good morning, I'm sorry, and your name is? My name is Zoya. Very nice to meet you. Welcome to Moscow. Thank you. How are you today? Very well, thank you. And yourself? I'm good, thanks for asking. This dialogue uses more formal language. Can you see what makes it formal? First, I started by saying good morning. The greetings good morning, good afternoon, and good evening are quite formal and are generally only used in formal situations. There is one exception. You can sometimes use good morning informally with people you know well. However, it's common in this situation to shorten it to just morning. Can you see the other examples of formal language in this dialogue? There are many. Firstly, Yoda asked Zoya's name by saying, "And your name is?" This is more formal than asking, "What is your name?" After I introduced myself, I said, "Very nice to meet you." Saying nice to meet you is neutral, neither formal nor informal. However, adding very makes it sound much more formal. One word can make a big difference. I introduced myself with a full sentence, "My name is Zoya." When speaking less formally, you'd use short introductions like "I'm Zoya" or just "Zoya." After I introduced myself, I said, "Welcome to Moscow." Does this sound formal or informal to you? It's quite formal. Do you know what makes it formal? Again, it's a small change that makes a big difference. Saying welcome by itself is neutral. It's not so formal. However, adding to and a place make it sound much more formal. So, if you say welcome to our office, that sounds formal, while if you just say welcome, it doesn't sound so formal. It's common when greeting someone in English to ask some kind of "how are you" question. Do you remember what I asked Yoda? I asked, "How are you today?" Again, one word makes the difference. Do you know which one? It's today. Asking "how are you" is neutral. Adding "today" makes it sound more formal. My answer "very well, thank you" also sounds quite formal. If I was speaking more neutrally, I'd say something like "well, thanks." Adding "very" and saying "thank you" instead of "thanks" make it sound more formal. Finally, Yoda asked me, "How are you back?" Do you remember how he did it? He asked, "And yourself?" This is more formal than asking "and you." I replied and said, "Thanks for asking." You wouldn't say "thanks for asking" in a more informal situation. So you've seen here how small changes can make a big difference to how formal your language sounds. Remember that formality doesn't depend on the words you use. Other things like tone of voice and body language are also important. Next, let's look at how to handle greetings and introductions in a neutral way. Neutral means neither formal nor informal. For example, imagine that you are at work and you meet a new colleague. You are the same age and you are in the same department. This is an example of neutral situation. You don't need to be very formal, but also you wouldn't want to sound too casual. Hello. Hello, are you Yoda? Yes, that's right. What's your name? Zoya, nice to meet you. And you? How are you? Fine, thanks. And you? I'm good, thanks. First, compare this dialect to the formal one from the part 1. They follow the same patterns, but this dialect is much less formal. Can you see the difference? First, we started with a neutral greeting, hello. You can use hello in any situations. Then I asked Yoda his name with a simple question, what's your name? Hello, what's your name? Pretty easy, right? That's because neutral language is generally the simplest language. If you compare these two dialects, you can see that this neutral dialect is shorter than the formal dialect you saw in part 1. This is very common. Formal language is often longer and more complex. Neutral language is short and simple. You can see this throughout the dialogue. We use the basic phrases and words that you probably learned in listening your English classes at school. Nice to meet you. How are you? Fine, thanks, and so on. Okay, so now you've learned about the differences between formal and neutral greetings and introductions. Now let's see how you can introduce someone else in English in formal and neutral ways. Here is a very formal introduction. Let me introduce my colleague Zoya. Here is another very formal way to introduce someone. May I introduce my colleague Yoda? What about neutral introductions? This is Zoya. Here is another way to make an introduction using neutral language. Have you met Yoda? So now you should understand how to greet people and introduce yourself and someone else in different situations. If you work in an office or you want to work in an office, chances are you will have to answer the telephone or at the very least take the telephone interview. Now I'm going to give you a lot of vocabulary and set phrases that you can use on the telephone. And I'll give you some tips on making yourself understood on the telephone, and I'll give you some telephone interview tips. Right? Let's get started with it. Let's start it by discussing what you should say when taking a telephone call. Obviously, you should start with hello, good morning, or good afternoon. You can also say your name, speaking, how may I help you? For example, hello, English on the Heart, Mary speaking, how may I help you? You can also say this is your name, is another way of saying your name, speaking. For example, good morning, English on the Heart, this is Mary speaking, how may I help you? Now, what should you say when you are making a call? Well, you should always start with hello, then you can say this is your name from your company. For example, hello, this is Mary from English Learned by Heart. Now let's talk about giving a reason for calling. You could say, I'm calling to ask about opening hours. I'm calling to discuss prices. Or I'm calling to clarify. I'm calling to clarify the features. You could also say, I just wanted to ask. For example, I just wanted to ask if you need any more stationery. Now let's discuss asking for somebody. You could say, may I speak to, and then the person's name. For example, may I speak to Zoe? You could also say, I'd like to speak to, name, please. For example, I'd like to speak to Zoe, please. Or you could say, is name there? For example, is Zoe there? Or is name available? For example, is Zoe available? What about asking for information? You could say, could you tell me? For example, could you tell me when you are closing today? Now let's discuss taking messages. You could say, could you tell me who is calling, please? Or, I'm sorry she's not here today. Could you take a message? And, I'm afraid he's not available at the moment. Can I take a message? Or even, I'll give her a message as soon as she gets back. Now let's talk about leaving messages. You could say, can you please take a message? Or, please tell him that his parcels have been delivered. And, I'd like to leave him a message. Another thing you really should practice if you are going to talk on the phone is making small talk. The most common one is, hi Mary, how is it going? But you can also discuss the weather, for example. So, how is the weather where you are? Or a common topic, for example. Have you seen that new pizza place in town? Or you can ask about the location, for example. Whereabouts are you calling from? Asking for repetition. You could say, could you spell that for me, please? Or, how do you spell that, please? And, let me see if I've got that right. You could also say, would you mind speaking up a bit? I can't hear you very well. And you could even say, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your first name. In this part of the lesson, we are going to talk about spelling things on the phone. To spell things on the phone, we use the native phonetic alphabet. You will need to learn this off by heart. Every letter in the alphabet has a corresponding word. A, alpha, alpha. B, bravo, bravo. C, Charlie, Charlie. D, delta, delta. E, echo, echo. F, foxtrot, foxtrot. G, golf, golf. H, hotel, hotel. I, India, India. J, Juliet, Juliet. K, kilo, kilo. L, Lima, Lima. M, Mike, Mike. N, November, November. O, Oscar, Oscar. P, Papa, Papa. Q, Quebec, Quebec. R, Romeo, Romeo. S, Sierra, Sierra. T, Tango, Tango. U, uniform, uniform. V, Victor, Victor. W, whiskey, whiskey. X, X-rays, X-rays. Y, Yankee, Yankee. Z, Zulu, Zulu. At the end of the lesson, you'll find that there is a quiz. Now let's discuss in the ending the call. You could say, thanks very much for your help. And you could also say, thanks for calling. And you could say, thanks for your time. Now I'm going to give you some tips for the phone job interviews. The biggest tip I can give you is to smile. Because when you smile while talking, it comes across over the phone. You can always tell when someone is smiling, even you can't see them. The second tip is to have notes. Have everything you might need to reference right in front of you to have it organized so that you can access it easily. Tip number 3 is to pick a suitable location. You don't want to be in a cafe or anywhere else with background noise. You also don't want to be distracted. Tip number 4 is always have water nearby. You might have a dry throat. Tip number 5, don't be afraid to ask for repetition and clarification. Use the phrases we discussed previously. And the last tip, number 6, to take notes yourself. You might need them for the follow-up interview. Okay, now it's time for a quiz. I'm going to spell out a word as I would on the telephone using the native alphabet There are questions in total. Write your answers in direct in Telegram. Number 1. Spell out the word as I said. Kilo, Alpha, Romeo, Echo, November. Number 2. What does this say? Bravo, Uniform, Sierra, India, November, Echo, Sierra, Sierra. Number 3. What about this? Mike, Uniform, Hotel, Alpha, Mike, Mike, Alpha, Delta. Number 4. Can you work this one out? Tango, Echo, Lima, Echo, Papa, Hotel, Oscar, November, Echo. And number 5. Can you understand this last one? Sierra, Uniform, Bravo, Sierra, Charlie, Romeo, India, Bravo, Echo. And I have 2 exercises for you. So make sure you send your answers so I will check them. Right, this is for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Don't forget to connect with me in all my social media. I have my Instagram, Telegram and TikTok. And I shall see you soon for another lesson. Bye!